Okay, good morning, guys. Today, let's talk about how media companies make money. And there's a few ways, but I think it's important to know, if you're going to work in media, how media companies actually make money that pay your paychecks. So we'll put like TV media aside, because that's basically what we call programmatic advertising. That's, every 7 minutes they run a bunch of advertisements that Unilever and BMW cars have already made these ads, and they've paid the spot to be put in on this show. And that's programmatic, meaning the CNN really had nothing to do with it. They just served in the ads. So we'll put that aside, and we're going to talk about digital media companies. So one thing I think that's interesting to note is that I think as of right now, according to Digiday, over half the publishers, their biggest revenue stream is now programmatic advertising. And it didn't always used to be this case. That's because there's a variety of revenue streams for news media companies on the internet. So let's go through ways you can monetize content. There's the most obvious, which is subscription, and kind of the most old-fashioned. Subscription in the terms of you buy a subscription for the New York Times, it gets delivered to your door, and the modern version of that would be paywall subscription. So you get to read 4-8 articles, and then you can't read any more unless you pay, and that's a subscription service. So you can make a subscription service, that's one revenue model. Then there's something called branded content. I should back up. So subscription, and there's something called native advertising. And under native advertising falls two tiers called branded content and sponsored content. And native advertisement is really pioneered in kind of the digital media age. And native advertising is really just advertising that's woven into the editorial content of any media company to make it look like it's a piece of editorial content, and that is not advertisement. Ethics of this aside, the reason to do this was one, engagement would be higher because the advertisements would be tailored to that publisher's audience. If it was a financial media company, the native advertising would have something to do with credit cards or financing a car, and that would be the advertisement, right? Or if it was BuzzFeed, it would have something to do with a quiz, and Disney would sponsor a quiz kind of deal. So that's native advertising. Is that it looks like it's just a quiz about princesses, or it looks like it's an article about different types of credit cards, but in reality it's an advertisement by MasterCard and Disney. And there's two ways of doing native advertising. There's branded content, which is that the advertiser pays the media company to make a piece of content, once to make it, and then two, to run it to their audience. So that can be quite lucrative. And then two, there's sponsored content, which is that the brand the advertiser just wants to be associated with that media publisher's brand. So the media company is already making content about something, let's imagine it's a series or a series of articles or reporting on this. And BMW wants to be associated with this media publisher's brand, so they sponsor the content, meaning they didn't really have any editorial control, and they didn't tell the media publisher to make that content or make that series, but they added their logo at the end because they wanted to be a part of it. So that would be sponsored content, which is different than branded content, which is made specifically for that advertiser, for that client. With that being said, though, that third one, which now accounts for over half the revenue of most digital media publishing companies, is programmatic advertising. And programmatic advertising is what you skip through, watched, or ad blocked to get to this video, which is just good old-fashioned, served ads to you, like a pre-roll ad. Programmatic advertising, that's just a fancy word for kind of pre-rolls or banner ads, something on the side of the YouTube page if you see something, buy this or that, or whatever it may be. That's programmatic. And for a while, digital media companies had strayed away from programmatic advertising because programmatic advertising often has no correlation with the audience that's consuming whatever media content they want to be consuming at the moment. So if you're reading an article on the Washington Post about Yemen, and on the side there's a banner ad about coloring your nails, the engagement is going to be pretty low. So programmatic advertising was avoided in favor of doing native advertising, building out branded content, etc. And that was lucrative for a while, but programmatic or branded content, native advertising takes a long time to make. Whereas programmatic is very fast and very easy. It's just being served in, it's put on the side, it's put as a pre-roll. The advertiser is taking care of it. They're making the content, or they're saying, hey, this is what our banner ad looks like, just serve it. Whereas native advertising is usually made in-house and just takes longer to put together. So you can't serve as much ads. That's why there's a higher premium, but also just the volume isn't as great. So recently there's been a shift, whereas it used to be mainly native advertising. That's kind of fallen recently, and you've seen more and more digital publishers go to programmatic advertising. Why is this? Well, just because ultimately it's more lucrative in terms of volume, and native content just takes too long to make. And there's now so many media companies that a publisher doesn't really know what to go with in terms of we could buy this big branded content, package with this one media publisher, or we could just do programmatic adding with 5 or 6, and our engagement might just be higher just by kind of a shotgun effect. So now you're seeing other digital media companies hop on board with programmatic advertising. Specifically, I think BuzzFeed's a good example of having avoided programmatic advertising for a long time. There's no banner ads. They strongly believed in branded content and native advertising. Everything was woven into their editorial content, so it was very hard to tell sometimes what was an ad and what wasn't. And they had an entire in-house kind of agency that would build, we tried Wendy's burgers on a date kind of thing. And it was actually a Wendy's advertisement, but it looks like a BuzzFeed video. So what does this mean if you're going into the media world, in terms of money? Well, one, okay, so that's how media companies make their money. But two, as more and more media companies switch to programmatic advertising and get more money from programmatic advertising, like BuzzFeed now runs banner ads, is that what happens is that a media company has a library of content, and they offer up certain libraries of content for programmatic advertising. Okay, you can run a pre-roll on this series and this type of video or this type of article, or this. You can run programmatic advertising on international news and on business news, but you can't run programmatic advertising on culture news. Kind of different buckets. And as each of those buckets, media companies open up those buckets for programmatic advertising, that beast is going to get harder and harder to feed. So there's going to be a demand for higher and higher volume of content, more content, more content, more content, more content, more content. Just as you see in TV with programmatic advertising, where if we have TV only for 4 hours, we can only have so many programmatic contents because we just want more ads at the end of the day. So why don't we switch to 24 hours of TV, and then we can get more programmatic things. So I would predict that you'll see a shift to, if you're entering the media industry, a higher volume of content. We just want volumes of content because on the back end, we are now making most of our money off programmatic advertising rather than native advertising. Now, there's an interesting thing to get into with programmatic advertising, which is that there's the open market programmatic advertising, and there's a closed private market programmatic advertising. Open market means let's say, BostWiki Services, LLC, is selling sweatshirts, right? And I want to get that out to as many people as possible. Well, the open market would be like Google or Facebook, right? I just put in my company thing, and then I type in that I want an audience of 18 to 35 men and women that are interested in X, Y, Z, and then Google serves it, and it just serves it. It makes the decision, serves it across the board, and that's kind of the open market. And or same with Facebook. Facebook and Google kind of dominate the open market of advertising. They kind of control everything. Now, there are also private markets where, let's take a media company who wants to do programmatic advertising, like pre-rolls and banner ads. Let's take Business Insider as an example. So let's say Business Insider wants to do programmatic advertising. It wants to have banner ads now and wants to have pre-rolls on its videos. But instead of letting Google do it on YouTube with just random pre-roll videos, what it wants to do is have its own video player and its own website, right? And then it wants to just selectively open up that content to whoever the highest bidder is, and not let Google do it, but them themselves do it. So they choose who their programmatic ads are going to. Now, once again, why would you want to do this? Why would you want to have a private market? Well, often, you can get in conflict when you have native advertising and programmatic advertising. If somebody's paid top dollar for native advertising on your site, and then their competitor has also paid for programmatic advertising on your site, and then you're suddenly like, well, wait a minute, I paid for this really special content to be like natively built and it's branded content, Business Insider, but then I also see banner ads from my competitor, Bisquick sweatshirts. What the heck? I thought I was paying any money. I don't want to see my competitor also right next to my video that you're running. So the private market allows media companies to kind of control that internal arguing between advertisers, whereas the open market, Google is just putting it to the highest bidder. Doesn't matter. It's just serving it left, right, and center. So there you go. There is the difference between private and public programmatic advertising markets. Then you have native and branded, like native content, which is branded and sponsored content. Branded content is totally built to make it look like it's editorial content. Sponsored content is just content that the brand is attached their name to because they like being associated with that brand. And then you have subscription services. That's also, we talk about merchandising, but that doesn't really have to do with content creation in and of itself. So the larger point I want to make about this, though, is like, where does news come in? Well, news helps media companies build their brand reputation. For better or for worse, however you may feel about it, advertisers like that media companies have a news arm. It adds esteem to their companies, and so therefore they're able to charge more money to get an ad on their site. So that's why you see a lot of random media companies like Business Insider or BuzzFeed or Vice have news arms. Is because it brings reputation to the brand and they can charge more money to an advertiser. So that's really what your goal is doing, is you're adding reputation to the media company's brand as a whole, which they can then sell their brand reputation to advertisers for a higher dollar. So that's why you see a lot of media companies that, normally we tried Starbucks drink, or, we went to House of Yes and explored it. Why they have also a news arm. It's all about money, folks. Anyway, hopefully that's helpful in, explaining the back end, how media companies make money and think about generating revenue and where the future's going. Have a good morning, guys. See you tomorrow.